Hey Keith, how you doing today?
Hey, Dennis. Doing great, doing great. How about yourself?
Doing okay. It looks like you might have some clouds coming in there behind you. I don't know.
Yeah, a little bit.
What
Hopefully, no
what,
rain.
what body of water is that?
That's Chowan River.
Okay,
It's looking
that's good.
at. I'm on the Bertie County side, looking at the Chowan County side.
I see. I see. So what direction is that? Is that west?
Directly east behind me.
Okay, directly east. Okay.
Yeah, the river runs north south.
Okay. Cool.
Pretty well kept secret.
Yeah, looks real nice. How far is that from Greenville, miles wise?
Um, I don't know the exact miles. It takes me about an hour and 15 minutes to get to work.
Yeah, yeah. Have you been doing remote all through this time period, or have you been
Yeah.
going to the office?
Yes, I've been doing remote, and I'm afraid that I might be hooked on it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Um, do you have good internet access there?
It's DSL, believe it or not, which is I'm amazed a lot of times that I can stay on some of these video meetings, but it's DSL over a phone line.
Okay, fantastic.
How's life out your way?
It's pretty good, pretty good. I'm going to get Chad here and we'll have a little bit of a conversation before we get started. Hey, Chad.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. So we're starting to assemble this group. I think because it's lunchtime related, sometimes it's a little slow.
Okay, I get it.
um, but we'll get there. So hang tight.
All
Um,
right.
I'll introduce you to the folks. Keith Wheeler. I don't know where he is on your screen. Keith is
Hi,
a
Keith.
retired Navy captain who runs our military and defense type programs that we're trying to work at the university. And he was the head of DARPA, which you may be familiar with.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
they started the internet.
yeah, yeah. My
Thank
my
you.
neighbor was my next door neighbor when I lived in D.C. was Vince Cerf.
Oh, okay.
So I know Vin real
Yeah,
well, and
yeah, that's great.
it's kind of
I
funny.
used to see I used to see him all the time walking the halls of DARPA, just touching bases with folks.
Yeah, I think he works for Google now.
Yeah,
Very academic kind of guy, very quiet.
Yeah.
We lived in a just a regular neighborhood, and I never realized he was famous until I moved away and he moved away. Our kids used to play together and all that kind of stuff. So you just you never know, I guess.
that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Yeah,
So
all the initial internet work was well before my time. In fact, I think it started before I was even born, back in the
Chad,
'60s.
don't believe him, Chad. You see that gray hair? That guy's been here since 1946. So don't listen to him. He's
Oh wow.
yeah. I'm just kidding. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get started, and
hmm
others may join us. Um, so uh, thank you very much for joining us, Chad. And I'm going to ask you some questions, and but you can also feel free to pontificate, add,
Sure.
subtract, whatever you feel
Absolutely.
good about. And so the group that we have on here, for the most part, we have a business accelerator that I mentioned to you that is in partnership with ECU and a foundation in North Carolina. We're one of 8 locations that are trying to help rural areas develop businesses that can grow and potentially hire people and so forth. So we just started September 1st. This is the first time we've done it, and most of the companies that are involved are I'm generalizing here, but relatively recent graduates who have started online businesses of one kind or another. And I think one of the objectives is to continue to live in Greenville and not have to move to a more crowded area or more urban area to get a
hmm
job. We also have some companies that have been around for a fair amount of time, but might be looking at pivoting or adding things that they haven't done in the past. So we have some of that, and we have a lot of creative people, artists, We have a maker space, a fella, Darby George, who's on here, that helps people with 3D printing, woodworking, metalworking, CNC machining, all that kind of stuff. So you have a mix of small businesses, mostly small businesses. And there's a handful of ECU folks on here, administrators, or we have Mike Harris, I noticed, signed in. Mike is he's the head of the Miller School of Entrepreneurship, which is the only standalone entrepreneurship school in the state of North Carolina. And also and I'll shut up, I promise, on this kind of stuff. ECU is one of 17 UNC system universities. A lot of people don't understand how that's set up. I know you probably do. But we have, we're primarily operating east of 95, the 29 counties east of 95, we consider our sweet spot, if you will. And Mike, I don't know if you want to say anything to start off with.
Yes, thanks, Chad, for joining us. Something that you'll find fascinating. I know that you like that blue school in the triangle, the dark blue school, I should say.
Right.
And the gentleman who runs the Duke Startup Law Clinic is an ECU alum.
Oh, okay.
We've established a relationship with that group. So I think actually in this accelerator at some point, that program will connect and provide advice and training. So we really appreciate it, as you completely understand that there's very few individuals who have all the answers. In fact, I'm not even sure how many answers there are. Is trying to learn from as many people as possible. You've seen this, you've done it. So I'm very excited for them to learn some reflections, advice, things to do and things maybe not to do. So it's community. So we're extremely appreciative. In the Miller School, we're simply put, we're trying to grow the entrepreneurial mindset and skill set across our campus and across the region. So we're very excited to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Well, here we go, Chad. And just
all right.
like I said, feel free to branch off at any point.
All right.
This might be kind of a surprising question, but what did you want to be when you grew up? When you were a little kid, what was on your mind?
I wanted to be an architect. And honestly, I don't think I really knew what an architect was. But my father, who was actually the county planner for Pitt County for many years, from 1984 to 2008, as a civil engineer. He and my brother were NC State engineering grads. And so I grew up around my dad's engineering and land surveying office. He was in private practice before he became a Pitt County employee. And he had all these drafting tables and blueprints and like rulers, and he would draw, property, and I helped him survey land and all kinds of stuff. And so somewhere I got in my head that I wanted to be an architect. I think I learned what an architect does probably only in the past few years, because I'm renovating a 1870 brownstone in Brooklyn right now. And, I know what an architect does because I get the bills every month. But I think that kind of reflected some desire to, build things. I didn't know that I was going to end up mostly building software kind of in the cloud and, things that I couldn't really see, but I think it was kind of this idea of building things.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. What would you say is the biggest factor that's helped you be successful in your career?
I would say flexibility. Like it's kind of interesting when at the end point, when you're kind of fully formed, as a CEO and took a company public and all that kind of stuff, it's easy to forget the beginning and like how you found your way there. And so even though I ended up working in technology and I was a CTO, a chief technology officer before being a CEO, I was that a few times. And my education was important. The path that I took was a really winding path. And so we mentioned Duke a minute ago, but like I went to Duke and I got an English degree. So much to the chagrin of my father and to some extent my brother, who are engineers. And if you know engineers, they're kind of very proud of being engineers. So I was going to Duke to get this kind of, read a bunch of Shakespeare and get this degree. It's kind of like, what kind of job are you going to get? And I grew up in a very practical family. Like my family didn't have money or connections or anything like that. And so they were kind of like, okay, you can get this English degree, but you have no idea what you're going to do. I was talking about flexibility. I didn't know what I was going to do. I graduated from Duke with an English degree, didn't know what I was going to do. And so I actually delivered pizza for like a year after I graduated from college. And I remember my family that was like proud of me for going to a place like Duke. And I went to D.H. Conley and Pitt County and like graduated #1 in my class and all that stuff. And then suddenly I've graduated from Duke and I'm delivering pizza. And
Perfect.
I think that I just didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. But I was always really interested in journalism and that kind of stuff. And so I was in Raleigh at the time. I went to work at the News and Observer in 1993. I just applied to a one ad for like a clerical job where I was doing filing and data entry and all this kind of stuff. And I just wanted to kind of be around a newsroom. I thought newsrooms are pretty exciting. And the job that I did was mostly filing papers in the place where they were building websites, and started asking questions like, what are you doing over there? And they said, oh, I'm doing Unix. Well, like, what's Unix? And they gave me a book and like a login to the Unix system, and I started looking at it. And then they started asking me to do little tasks. And basically I taught myself how to code working at the newspaper. And this is kind of a footnote to history now. People don't remember this, but the News and Observer was the first daily newspaper on the web in the United States. It was ahead of everybody else.
Did not know that.
So it was. So the News and Observer was doing incredibly innovative things, and I would say even innovative things for newspapers today. Like they were building online services and selling them like B2B to, they built a database of legislative bills in the North Carolina legislature and sold this searchable database to lobbyists in 1994.
Wow.
And so I taught myself how to code there. And if I'd gone to Duke and said I'm going to major in electrical engineering and I'm going to be an electrical engineer and like I'm going to go on this particular path, I never would have found myself filing papers at the News and Observer. So that I won't tell my whole life story here, but a really interesting thing happened at the News Observer that I think was kind of the real catalyst that got things going. One of my colleagues was interviewing to be the webmaster at the Atlanta newspaper. And webmaster is kind of an old thing. Some of you, if you're over 40, you might remember when they were webmasters. And, this was a guy who had a computer science degree from UNC. He went down to interview in Atlanta and he said, I don't want to move to Atlanta, but I know someone who could do this job. And so he referred me. And I just delivered my last pizza like 6 or 8 months before, but I was building websites for the first newspaper on the web in the United States. So I was like way ahead of the game. So I went down to Atlanta, and I think it was maybe the first time I'd ever gotten on a plane. Like my family didn't fly anywhere because we're all from North Carolina. Like, why fly to Raleigh from Greenville? And so I flew down to Atlanta, which was a real thrill, and they made me an offer like before I left. And I remember they were like, "What do you need to make?" And I was like, "I'm just going to make up a crazy number." So I made up a crazy number, and they printed an offer letter, and I signed it and flew back to Raleigh. And 6 months after delivering my last pizza, I was running the online operation for the 10th largest paper in the United States, like the #1 paper in the South, and I was 23 years old. So I think none of that would have happened if I hadn't just kind of kept my eyes open, if I wasn't like really flexible in what I did. And even jumping way ahead, joining Etsy, I joined Etsy when it was 40 people and like 6 million in revenue, which is a lot of money in absolute terms, but not a lot for a tech company. And decided, I lived in the Bay Area at the time, and my wife and I decided to kind of take a chance and move to New York. And Etsy didn't look like it was necessarily going to make it. There were a lot of problems in the business and everything. And so I took that chance. And, that was probably the most important decision I've made in my life other than marrying my wife. And, that was another case of kind of like scanning the environment, like looking for opportunity and not being too rigid in what I was trying to do. But yeah, I'm kind of amazed any of it happened. I mean, I grew up in Greenville. Like both my parents like worked on tobacco farms when they were kids. Like we were the first kids who didn't work in tobacco growing up. All my relatives were mostly farmers and kind of simple country people. And then the next thing you're ringing the bell at NASDAQ, and it's like I'm still surprised.
That's a thrilling story. Let me ask you. So you got an English degree, and then you ended up on your own, kind of looking into computer related and particularly web related. Do you feel like you had like math ability or engineering ability that or were you intimidated by that kind of stuff? Talk about your skill set, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, so I would say, even though I mostly focused on liberal arts, I had a balanced skill set. Like I took calculus my senior year of high school and did okay, and I was on the math team in 7th grade, and so, but I also enjoyed reading and literature and writing and all that stuff. And I think that one of the things I've learned from a kind of a practical but also educational standpoint, I've met a lot of people who are real successful in the tech industry, and I spent 10 years out in Silicon Valley and 12 years in New York, and a lot of the most kind of brilliant, accomplished people I've met are really balanced in they're like really good communicators and writers, but they're also kind of technical. And so I think that balance is really important. And then, none other than Steve Jobs talked about Apple, and he said that I'm not going to get the exact quote right, but he said that Apple was successful because it was the fusion of technology and liberal arts. And Jobs, a friend of mine worked very closely with Steve Jobs as his assistant for a decade, and he told me that Steve would occasionally kick back, and this is the part of Steve you don't hear about, and he would kick back and say, what, like, kind of tired of running a tech company. Like, I think I might want to go study calligraphy or like painting or something like that. And so I think the best products and the best products that I think we all use are kind of the fusion of like great technology with great design and great communication and copywriting and all those things together. So I think I got lucky because I spent the first 15 years of my career explaining why I was an English major, and I think the world is starting to catch up with like, oh, okay, like communication design, like all these sort of soft things are becoming important because the internet's become so mainstream that you have to build things that work for normal people and communicate to normal people and all that kind of stuff.
I've not met any normal people lately, I must admit.
Yeah,
what mistakes have you made along the way? Would you say, if any?
Oh gosh, you have 4 hours to even start.
I do. This is Zoom. We're in Zoom land. Unlimited.
Well, I don't think I made a ton of mistakes like early on career-wise, and I think anyone who's been through like any kind of business boom, and the internet was a huge business boom, there's so much opportunity that you can make a lot of mistakes, but if you're around the opportunity, the extent of the opportunity kind of papers over the mistakes you make. And so I think I was in San Francisco during 1999, like the big boom and bust, and I saw all that kind of stuff. But I would say most of the mistakes I've made in business were around like people decisions. Like I hired the wrong person, or I had the person I thought was the right person and they weren't doing well, and I wasn't quick enough to kind of move them out of the job and that kind of thing. And so I think that that's really important. One of the things I'm doing right now is I have an executive coaching practice, so I'm I'm coaching executives right now in 17 different companies, you know, ranging from Portugal to the Bay Area to New York, like all over the country. And so I think what I just described is kind of a common issue that people have. I think if you're a CEO and executive, to some extent, you have to be an optimist. Like you have to believe that what the plan that you set forth is going to be realized. You have to believe that the people you hire are going to work out because you've advocated and sold them to come to your company. And so I think a lot of CEOs, and I was this way too, struggle a little bit when things don't go well because they believe in people and they believe in the plan. And so that can be a challenge. I think that Etsy, when Etsy went public, and I probably don't want to spend too much time on IPOs, but I made a bunch of mistakes on just some of the mechanics of going public that I could talk about are probably not that interesting to all of you, but just to give one example, is like we decided, and this is something I really believed in, not to provide quarterly guidance to the street, kind of trying to kind of focus people on the longer term. And if you know how Wall Street works, and I learned some of these lessons the hard way, you get like consensus estimates. And if you don't give guidance, then the consensus comes from people coming up with their own estimates, and they may not be the estimates that you want. And so I think I tried to, that's maybe a general category. Like sometimes I tried to do things for kind of noble and thoughtful reasons, but I didn't think about the ramifications of like what that would mean day to day. And so like I'd say the bigger lesson is like always try to balance those things. Like have ethics and beliefs, but also plan out and strategize like what might happen if like your plan doesn't go. But yeah, I could go on about mistakes for a long time.
That's no, I think we all could. Would you talk a little bit about the importance of assembling or putting together a team and how that works from your perspective?
Absolutely. I mean, teams are everything. And to some extent, if you have, a startup of more than one person, which by nature they are, like you're in the realm of teams. And so I think, I'm 48 now, and I've worked in startups, and I've worked in big companies, and I've worked in different geographic regions. But the thing that I've consistently noticed is if a team is highly functional and there's a high degree of trust in the team, you can do anything. You can get anything done. On the opposite side, if there's a low degree of trust and there's a lot of dysfunction in a team, it's hard to do anything. So I think, finding talent, like attracting talent in the right positions, like in a company, building the right team, knowing, especially in a company like Etsy that scaled pretty much all metrics while I was there, from the time I started to the time I left, went up like 50x, like people, revenue, like everything. You also have to know when someone you really value who's done a really good job is maybe reaching the end of the capabilities, and you have to bring in someone else. So the team, especially in software companies and kind of knowledge companies, tech companies, the team and the dynamics of the team is really, really everything. It's kind of like sports. Like if you hear about teams that are arguing a lot in the locker room and the coach there's a lot of dissension. It's rare that those teams win championships. I think team is really everything.
Do you find yourself when you're dealing with teams, is this personal referrals or connections? And when you're assembling a team, how do you kind of go about that in a general way?
Yeah, I think that in my experience, if you come into a company that you're not necessarily starting yourself, it is really helpful to bring people in who you trust, because it can be an accelerator. So if you need a really great finance person and you've had a really great CFO, coming into a company and bringing that finance person can be like a real accelerant, assuming that you don't have the right finance person in the company already. But I think it's also important because the function of a team is largely based on having like a strong culture. And any company, even if it's not going well, has good aspects of culture. So I think that you have to really balance bringing in kind of new blood and old blood and that kind of thing. I don't think, wholesale replacement of teams is necessarily a good thing. So I think um, you're always trying to build kind of the right team for the moment with kind of a little bit of old, a little bit of new. And it's almost a cliche about different perspectives on a team, but I think you really do need different perspectives. And one of the people I enjoy readings, and everything he's written is pretty much a classic, is Peter Drucker. And Drucker talks about decision making and how you shouldn't make a decision until you've had a lot of discussion and dissent. And so the differing viewpoints around a table in a team are really kind of, and that dissent that they create can be the ingredients for some of the best decisions.
Okay. What would you say was the hardest business decision you ever had to make?
I think they've always been around people, and everything's kind of a distant second after that. So it would be hard to tell you about specific people without naming who they are, but and I wouldn't say this is a hard decision. It was kind of an easy decision. It was a hard scenario, but I had a high performing executive who was really well qualified and doing solid work with really unique skills. And I discovered like a harassment issue in the company that was really egregious that this person had perpetuated. And so it wasn't it was actually a very quick decision, did an investigation and that sort of thing. A quick decision, but it was still wrenching because I had to, I lost a team member who, from a kind of a tactical standpoint, was making really strong contributions, but I also, it left me with a lot of questions like, how could this happen? And, what else is happening that I don't know about? That kind of thing. Yeah. So it was an easy decision, but the circumstances were very difficult.
Okay. Can you talk about mentors and influences on you that helped you along the way, maybe starting in school or maybe after?
Sure. So I think, like many people, parents are really important. And I think my dad in particular was a really great mentor. And my brother and I, this really blows my mind. My brother and I, like a lot of kids in the 80s, we had a lawn mowing business. And so we would mow lawns around our neighborhood in Greenville. And my dad taught me a lot about business in that scenario. And just to give you a sense of like just how intense that was, we started out with a push lawn mower, and we had one or two lawns, and then we had 5 lawns, and we decided it'd be worthwhile to have a riding lawnmower. And so my older brother, who lives in Raleigh now, but we went to my dad and we said, "Hey, could you buy us a riding lawnmower?" And he said, "No, I can't buy you a riding lawnmower, but I'll loan you the money at prime +2 or something." And I was like 8 years old. And I didn't even know what interest really was. And so I asked my dad, like, what's interest? And he kind of explained it to me. And then I said, well, what's prime? And he said, well, go turn to page 8 of the Daily Reflector and like look on the, the stock quote page. And there's a little box that tells you what the prime rate is. And so, so my dad took his Sears credit card, and, interest rates back then were like, 17, 18%. It was like high interest rate time. And my brother and I basically we got paid pretty much all in cash. We would give my dad cash at the end of the month, like whatever it was. And so after, I think a year, we had paid back the lawnmower. And so that really taught me the value, not of just of money, but like how business works. Yeah. you take a risk, you borrow money to expand, you pay it back, then you decide whether to expand again. So, things like that are really important. And then like one last note on my dad is probably when I was 10 years old, like around early April, late March, he asked me if I'd paid my taxes yet. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I don't pay taxes. And he gave me, I don't know if we ever actually filed this, but he gave my brother and me 1040 EZs and made us like count up all of the money we had made and like fill out the form. And I don't know, he probably put it in a shredder after we did it, but I really appreciate that. And I think even when I was running a public company and like thinking about like whether to invest money here or there, like it's the same principle. And so to learn that when you're 8 years old was really remarkable. Another person that was really inspiring, I worked for a company called IDG, which people have either heard of if they're just kind of like, what's that? International Data Group. And so in its heyday, we were publishing all the dummies computer books and like Macworld and Network World and InfoWorld. And so the founder of that company was Pat McGovern, passed away maybe 5 years ago. But Pat basically started the modern computer magazine. And so he and built the company, and it was a closely held company. I think he held 90% of it when he passed away. And I'd go to board meetings for the property that I work for. I work for InfoWorld magazine, the enterprise tech magazine. And I remember we would run events for CTOs and CIOs and kind of tech executives. And we would report, we haven't sold that many tickets to the event. And, the tickets are $500. And Pat would tell us, like, the reason you're not selling enough tickets is because you need to raise the price, which was counterintuitive. And he said, if I'm a CIO and I'm flipping through the magazine and I see that there's a conference in San Francisco and it costs $500, I'm going to think it's not really worth much. But if it's $2,000, I'm going to think, yeah, there are going to be some real players and heavy hitters at this conference. Like that's a good conference. And he was always right. And a very good businessman. And also, so aside from being a great businessman, he taught me about the value of people. Kind of when I was there, IDG had companies, I think in 30 or 40 countries. And every year, thousands of employees, Pat, and he did this year round, he would go to every office. And in the United States, around Christmas, he would come walking around with the managers, and he would, for every person in the entire global company, he would say, I heard that you did a good job on, this very specific thing. And then he would ask you in front of your manager, like how your manager was doing. And everyone loved it and hated it at the same time. And so that really taught me that you could be like a really successful businessman, but also like really take time for people. And it was like very genuine. And he did it for, 40 years.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So I just really appreciated that personal touch. And occasionally he had this paper that had like a rainbow on it and it said good news. You would get what looked like a hand typed letter from Pat saying like, because I wrote a column for InfoWorld and it would say, I read your column on, last week in the magazine and I really like this point you made. Wow. And so, after multiple moves and many years and many things, I still have those letters from Pat that I keep with me. So I do think that you can combine like a really strong business head with actually really caring for people and taking care of people. And so Pat taught me that, and I saw that in my dad too, and kind of the work that he did.
It's a fantastic. If you could start all over again, would you do anything differently than you did?
I actually don't think so. Yeah, I really don't think so. When I hear that question, the thing that I think is I don't know that I could have this run of luck again. And I think that one of the things I've realized is like, you have to be ready for luck. Like you have to see it and you have to pursue it. So like everything isn't just luck. But in a lot of ways, there is luck. And so just to give you a very quick example, like I decided to graduate from Duke a semester early because I was on financial aid and it was really expensive. And so I graduated in December 93 instead of May of 94. And so I decided because, I needed a job. That's when I ended up at the News Observer and I was delivering pizza. I was doing both of those at the same time. And Mosaic, the first kind of commercial web browser, or at least for regular people, came out in March of 1994, like while I was at the News Observer. So had I decided to do my last semester at Duke, I would have graduated in May, and the internet started between December and May. I would have been in school. And to be at the first newspaper in the United States at the moment that the kind of modern internet was born, I mean, I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't been there
Isn't that something?
at that moment.
Did you meet
Yeah.
Mark Andreessen at that point or later on?
I didn't meet Mark Andreessen then, but I met him later. And, we pitched his venture firm. They didn't ultimately fund us, but, one of the people who worked for me at Yahoo was a guy, when I was working at the News Observer, a guy named, well, years later, I worked with him, but when I worked at the News Observer, like you'd get a not found page and you'd get the error page for NCSA HTTPD, the web server, and it would have his email. His name was Rob McCool. Like I'd never forget Rob McCool's name.
Great name.
Yeah. And it almost sounded like it wasn't a real person. And then when I went to work at Yahoo, Rob McCool worked there, and I got to know Rob McCool. And I said, Rob, like I used to see your name on those error pages, and I feel like I'm, like your royalty in some way. And so, so that was really neat. So yeah, I don't think I would change anything. And yeah, I just feel super lucky because growing up in Greenville, like I didn't even know anybody who lived outside of North Carolina. Like it was like those old maps where there are dragons on the edge of the earth, like, and you would sail off into like, that was how I saw the border of North Carolina. Like that was where the dragons on the map were. Like it was just places that I never thought I would go. My grandfather on my father's side had never been out of North Carolina. And my family, we went on a family trip and drove my grandfather and grandmother into Tennessee. And I'll never forget, we drove over the border of Tennessee, and my grandfather immediately kind of whipped his neck back and looked back at North Carolina. And he was a guy who wore overalls and, farmer. And he said, you know what? Doesn't feel too different. Feels kind of the same. And so that was the environment I grew up in. So to have done what I've done, I feel really, really fortunate, and, and have a great, happy family and all that stuff. So,
yeah. Great accomplishment there. Let's switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to make you put your prognosticator hat on, or future. Can you talk a little bit? One of the things that we're dealing with is, small businesses. We're far away from any kind of tech center. I guess you could say Raleigh is, but we're 100 miles from there. So do you have any thoughts about, particularly about e-commerce and small businesses and kind of the opportunity that you see at this point?
Absolutely. And one thing I would mention, I don't know if I met you there, Dennis. Maybe I did. I may have met some other of you there, like in I think it was April 2018. I spoke at the NC East Alliance meeting.
Yeah, with John Chafee. Yeah, he's
right.
One of our mentors also.
Got it. And so I posted this on my blog. I did a presentation called Technology. I think it was Technology, Local Economy, and Craft Economies, or something like that. But I could send that to you if you had any trouble finding it. And I talked about this a little bit there. But I think what I don't think people around the whole country and really around the world have caught up with mentally is that no matter where you are, you have access, especially with the cloud, to the exact same tools that anybody has in Silicon Valley or New York or Atlanta or like anywhere, Austin. Like no difference at all. It's not even a little bit of difference. And so I think, and then I look at a city like Wilson, North Carolina, and they've got the fastest internet in the world. Like there's no difference with their broadband that they've built, it's just as fast as somebody in Singapore or Taiwan or San Francisco or whatever, better than San Francisco because I've lived there. And surprisingly, the internet's not good there.
Yeah, in some of those neighborhoods, you're right.
So I think, and I had to learn this too, like I think that some of it's kind of embracing that mentality, kind of knowing that you have as much access to technology and infrastructure as anyone else. And so, and customers. So if you're in an e-commerce business, like you can reach buyers all around the world and all around the country just as easily as anyone in like a big metro area. So I think it's almost like having the confidence of knowing that even though you live in a place that maybe isn't as populated as one of the population centers, you have the same tools that everyone else has. So I think, you know, especially with the pandemic, I mean, I'm not saying anything particularly that someone hasn't said before, but I think, you know, people are kind of distributing. We're already distributing out from the cities and are now distributing out a bit more. So I could imagine, you know, when I was in Greenville, like the big company in Greenville at the time was Burroughs Welcome. And so, and local governments are always trying to attract, you know, big companies and give big tax breaks and all that kind of thing. I think that sort of government and civic leaders kind of shift their mindset and start thinking about like how do we attract lots of, you know, small businesses. Like what if instead of, and I know Burroughs Welcome is like super dated, that probably happened in the 70s or 80s, but instead of Burroughs Welcome, like what if you were able to create an environment where, you know, 10,000 Etsy sellers wanted to come live in Greenville. You know, another example that actually I talked to John Chafee about a lot. He kind of educated me on this, like the brewing industry. There was I think a Coors Miller brewer in Eden, North Carolina, that was kind of the main employer in Eden. And when it went away, and they closed the plant, it really hurt that area because they were so dependent on this one brewer. And so if you look at a city like Asheville, I've lost count, but I think they have something like 35 brewers in the country. And I actually in the city, I did the math and I looked at like how many people were employed at this Eden brewery that went completely away when they shut down, and then how many people were employed in the Asheville breweries, which had, I think, a guaranteed minimum wage and all kinds of stuff. And the economic impact of, you know, the 35 breweries in Asheville was higher than the one, and it was also a lot more resilient from an economic perspective. And so I think
that makes sense.
Just thinking about like individually and collectively, thinking about, you know, wherever you are, the things that drive the economy can be aggregated in different ways than we used to think about, kind of like the old plant and that kind of thing. And, you know, Etsy is really an example of that. Like Etsy, in a lot of ways, was a global entity that basically just aggregated activity around the world. And in some ways, it's like a giant referral engine. Like we connect buyers and sellers, but, you know, Etsy didn't have a big warehouse or a plant or anything like that. And so I think the future is going to be a lot more distributed, both in where people live, but also kind of how they do business.
Would you, there's a couple things that prompts me to think about. One is, you know, I'm a little bit older than you, but I can remember when, you know, the life of a business, if you will, was usually at least a generation, if not multi-generation. And what I've seen, and I've been involved in e-commerce and things over the years, it seems like the business cycle is a lot shorter, and that the lifetime of a business can be very successful, but still very short. Can you comment on that?
Yeah. Wow. I haven't thought about that too much, but it's true. And I mean, I'm sure someone's done a lot of research on this, so this is just more kind of me thinking through it out loud. I mean, I think that the internet, which is really, really great because it's connected all of us, it's also connected people in such a way that competition happens so much faster. And so I think when we were all isolated from each other, and, you know, honestly, some days I wake up and think that was better
Yeah, I'm sure.
But we don't have to go there. Um, but you know, if I'm creating a product in, you know, Greenville or Austin or New York or anywhere in the world, like you're doing it on the world stage, like people in every country in the world are able to see like what you're making and kind of what you're building. And so I think that the reaction time that people have is super fast. And so I think there's just been a real compression. You know, a generation is, you know, 30 odd years. Um, Back in the day when you would like mail order stuff and everything would take longer. You just see more and react to more. And so I think fashion moves faster and product needs move faster, and everything is digital. So the platforms are moving faster. You know, when Apple releases a new iOS, it's a really, really big deal. When the new version of Android comes out, it's a really, really big deal. So I think everyone's just having to go faster and faster and faster. And I think pretty much almost all companies become irrelevant at some point, but that irrelevance has accelerated. And so, you know, I worked at Yahoo, and like Yahoo was, if you're of a certain age, like Yahoo was the hottest thing in the world, hands down, from like 1995 or 1994, 95, probably to 2001. And now you read a story about Yahoo, it's kind of, now it's somewhere deep down in the Verizon corporate structure. But it's only been 25 years since it was the hottest thing ever, and it's already been through the whole cycle of going away and getting, you know, sucked into something else.
Is Jerry Yang working at Verizon? Do you know?
No, Jerry is. I got to know Jerry, which is really great. And I just like Rob McCool, the engineer. Like when I saw Jerry, he's like Jerry. Like when I was learning the internet, I was looking at you in these magazines and like whatever. But he's an investor, and one of the big bets that Jerry made, which turned out to be massively important, is he invested in Alibaba when it was tiny.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, you know, you put $1 into Alibaba when it's worth $10 million, it's worth, I don't even know how to do the math.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, I think the cycles are a lot faster. And, you know, even we saw this on Etsy where like you would see like something happen, like someone would say something like in a presidential debate or like a live TV event, there was like a catchphrase, and within minutes there were like T-shirts and mugs and everything with that phrase on it.
Yeah.
And when, you know, when I was a kid, that whole process would have taken probably 6 months.
Easy. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
One of the problems that we run across, and this is true across the country, but the ratio of business users to technology makers, if that's the right word, I think conservatively is 10 to 1. So for every 10 business users, there's one technical person.
Mm-hmm.
So our group, you know, we struggle with how do we get this stuff done, and added to that, the statistics that we're seeing, and I'm sure you're aware of, that e-commerce in general is moving to mobile. That we're seeing
Mm-hmm.
I've seen net numbers anywhere from 50 to 75% of e-commerce is actually happening on mobile. Do you have any comments on how we kind of put our arms around how to do that? Yes, we have internet access, but we don't necessarily have the talent
Right.
who's trained in some of these technologies.
Yeah, I think that, and this is a little bit of a slippery slope for reasons I'll explain, but I think that the easiest way to get up to speed, especially when you're starting out, is to, you know, hop on one of the platforms. And so I think Shopify is obviously a good example. I lost track of,
Yeah.
they're one of the biggest companies, and I think they're the biggest company in Canada now, like just based on market cap. And as a very quick side note, we approached them in 2009 at Etsy because we wanted to buy them because and so I met with Shopify when they were like 5 people and worth nothing. And they said, you know, we're going to try to build a really big company. And we said, good luck. And they did. So I think you can jump on the platform and that can get you up to speed really quickly. So, you know, Shopify, and they've been exploding during this huge e-commerce surge during the pandemic. You know, you can set up a shop and be mobile, and, you know, Etsy, if you're doing a certain kind of thing, you can do it very quickly. The downside is you become beholden to the platform and its business strategy. So if you sell, you know, widget X, and then somehow Shopify decides that they want to sell widget X, excuse me, or they want to prioritize another vendor who's selling the same widget as you, then you lose. And this is why you see small businesses are regularly filing lawsuits against Google. Like, they were on the Google platform and they were getting really good SEO and search attention, and then Google changed the algorithm, and then suddenly they disappear. So that's the hazard of being on a platform. You can get up to speed really quick, but then you're deep in it, and then getting off the platform is very difficult. And so we faced this at Etsy very early on. When I joined Etsy in 2008, actually almost through 2010, almost all the transactions on Etsy went through PayPal, and PayPal was owned by eBay at the time. Now it's a standalone company, but we were growing and venture backed and trying to plot course to an IPO, and all of our sales data was going to eBay.
Wow.
And so the platform, if you're lucky enough to grow and scale, you can become competitive with the platform, and the platform is never going to act kind of like in your favor. So, but I think just like Etsy started out with PayPal, because building a payment system is very complex and was really complex then, sometimes you have to get on the platform to get up to speed quickly, because it allows you to test your idea in the market. And the hardest part about building a business is does anyone even care about my product?
Yeah.
And so you don't want to build all this infrastructure and then say, okay, now I'm going to see if anyone cares, and no one cares.
Yeah.
Like, it's better to go out with a Shopify or something like that. But it's if you're lucky to really grow, then the technology task becomes like unwinding from your tight relationship with the platform if you need to.
Okay. We as a group, just about all of our participating companies, I think except one, are on the Shopify platform. And,
Got it.
And one of our companies, who unfortunately is not participating today because she had a doctor's appointment, but she actually started on Etsy, and
Oh, got it. Yeah.
they're now doing significant business, over $1 million on Etsy, and they're running into a lot of conflict. And I don't even know all the details, but they really would like to get off the platform for a bunch of reasons.
Yeah.
Like you just described, there's conflict going on there that's not of their doing, other than their success. So
it's very complicated too.
Yeah, we've been lucky. We've hooked up with a large Shopify partner out of Houston. Their CEO has been really good at talking to us, and we had a presentation yesterday about progressive web apps and how to put them on the front end of your Shopify so that your store loads really quickly on mobile, particularly coming into Christmas. So we're paying attention to that as much as we can.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do now, because the time has gone by so fast, we could just keep going, but I think it's we ought to open up the floor to questions from the group. And Chad, if there's anything else you would like to say before I do that, please let me know. But otherwise,
that'd be great.
Okay.
And I don't know kind of the structure of the class completely, but I have a little extra time if you need to run over. So I'm good on my end. Okay,
fantastic. So I'm going to throw it out. Hopefully these people are actually paying attention. They're not actually asleep behind these little settings. Please feel free to ask any questions.
I'm drinking my iced tea. That's one of the things that came with me from growing up in the South. I drink iced tea constantly.
Is it sweet tea or unsweetened?
It's actually sweet tea.
I love it. My wife too. She won't drink any other kind of tea.
I have one glass of sweet tea every day, and the rest of it's unsweetened. But I just love sweet tea.
Yeah, that's great.
Hey, Chad, it's Mike Harris again.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, it's not a question, but something that you may find fascinating. 3 years ago, we created an event called the Pirate Challenge, and it's an all-call. It's anyone who has an idea can develop the idea to pitch, and it's open to anyone at ECU, from a freshman to someone in the MD program. This past year, it's a 3-round event. We had 123 teams from 50 majors across the campus. So when we hear your story, how you came out of English, you've had a very diverse background. That is actually something that excites us tremendously at ECU. The interesting thing about the institution is that we've got everything from the business side to medicine to construction to education to engineering and arts and sciences. And we're really trying to push this concept of anyone can become an entrepreneur if you've got the passion and the work ethic. So since we launched the competition, and Taylor, the one he was referring to from Etsy, or that started on Etsy, she won the event the first year at 19. In 3 years, we've worked with about 280 teams from over 50 majors across the campus. So we're extremely excited to push this across the university and to work with all departments. I appreciate the diversity of your experiences.
Thank you. That's really fascinating. And I think, I mentioned the lawn mowing business I had when I was a kid. My brother and I would sell greeting cards and all kinds of stuff. But the thing that still blows me away after so many years working in the industry is, especially now, is you can start a global business anywhere. And, if I was growing up now, I don't know if I would have mowed lawns. I might have made something and sold it on Etsy or built a Shopify site or, all kinds of things. And you can buy global advertising on Google and Facebook. And it's just amazing what you can do. I never lost the kind of sense of wonder at Etsy, and even just working in the tech industry about the things that people can create that come out of nowhere. It's just amazing what you can do now.
Well, one other point that Mike did not bring up that's pretty cool about the Pirate Entrepreneurship Challenge. We believe it's one of the most generous startup or pitch programs in the country. Certainly in North Carolina, we have over $100,000 worth of cash and in-kind contributions for the winners of the competition. So I think that's great. Yeah, it's pretty cool. We'd love to have you come down sometime and maybe be a judge or help us. We've got some really cool people that are involved from around the world, actually, that we've gotten involved. So we'd love to have you come at some point.
Oh yeah, I'd love to come.
Yeah, absolutely, open invitation.
Yeah, I would love to come.
We won't have pizza, I don't think, right, Mike? We pizza has been hadn't worked out since Chad left, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I live in Brooklyn, and the neighborhood I live in Brooklyn is called Carroll Gardens. It's like a kind of Italian neighborhood historically, and I'm not kidding, about 7 pizza places within 3 blocks of where I am right now. Wow. So I'm good.
Yeah. But do we have anyone else that would like to ask a question? Keith?
I was just going to say, I'll pick up the tab for all the sweet tea you can consume.
Yeah. I need some corn sticks at Parker too.
That's the thing I was about to say. I know as someone who grew up in the South, I shouldn't say I know. I'm going to assume that you're a barbecue fan. So I live in Eden. So I'll make sure that you get some high quality some barbecue. It's a deal.
I have to tell a very quick story. I was the student government president at D.H. Conley my senior year. And, we would sell candy bars to raise money for the library and all that stuff. And I had an idea, this is entrepreneurial, could we do something different that had better margins and everything? And so there was a girl in my class, and her dad was a hog farmer. And so I went to her and said, would your dad give us his 2 best hogs? And if he will, then I'm going to go to Pete Jones in Ayden and just walk in and say, I'm with the school. If we bought you 2 slaughtered hogs, would you make barbecue with them? And he said yes. So we did a fundraiser at homecoming. All we had to do was buy the plates, and we had Pete Jones barbecue, and it was like a 99% margin on that, and it was the biggest fundraiser ever. And so I tell people up here in New York and in the Bay Area about that, and I haven't met anyone who's commandeered hogs from his high school class and had a successful fundraiser.
That's a unique opportunity there.
It's a great example of creativity.
Oh yeah, it was great.
So I will ask a question, Chad, just from your time at Etsy, because you obviously took it from kind of a core group to a global scale.
Yeah.
What is, I guess, the most memorable milestone that took kind of a leap, or, you know, just a huge amount of trust and faith that you personally saw that the company needed, and then when you saw it come to fruition? Can you just talk about that at all?
Yes. So like when I joined as the CTO, the website would barely stay up, and so a lot of my work for the first year was building the team and the infrastructure just to kind of keep it up, and like Amazon Web Services and all that wasn't quite there yet, so we weren't able to use that. So it was like a lot of really hard work, and that was very, very early. You know, the company was doing 7 million in revenue, and I think when I left, it was doing like 400 million revenue, and so that's a part that doesn't sound like a pivotal point, but I don't think if we had gotten through that period at a time when, you know, Etsy was known but not super well known, I think the whole thing could have kind of collapsed in on itself. And so that really taught me in that period kind of the importance of having the nuts and bolts right. You know, if you're running a business and you have a kind of an open sign on it, like it's got to work. Like people have to be able to open the door. And so getting the tech platform in place was really, really important. And then I think that the crazy thing about doing that, you know, I was with the company for 9 years, is it's kind of like the frog boiling in the water. Like every day you're making progress, but you're in the thick of it. And then one day you wake up and you're, you know, ringing the bell at NASDAQ. And so in some ways it happened very gradually. So it's hard to identify a point, but it was you know, pushing a rock up a hill like every day. Like the weight of the rocks and the composition of the rocks changed, and sometimes the rock rolled over you and you had to dust yourself off and push it back up again. But you know, I think from talking to other people who've been through this, one of the people I worked with at Yahoo was Stuart Butterfield, who was the founder of Slack, and you know, Slack has become really huge. And we've talked about before, it's just kind of day after day of hard work. And I think that the thing that's surprising to me is just how not glamorous it is. It's you know, and somewhere along the way, tech startups became really glamorous. You know, like there was this Justin Timberlake's in the, you know, the movie The Social Network saying, you know, $1 billion and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But the reality of the work is just kind of grueling, kind of grunting and pushing like day after day after day.
Right.
But you know, when you do that and things are growing, like small numbers become big, and you build on the big numbers and they get bigger, and then, you know, there are more zeros on it and more people. But it's it's just step by step by step by step. I wish I had a more profound answer.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. It's like raising a kid. The kid changes a little bit every day.
Yeah, hopefully. And then they backslide and you have to push, Sisyphus has to keep pushing the rock.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, do we any more comments or questions? Our time is just about up. And Chad, if you were here, we'd give you ECU something or other in appreciation for what you've done. And
thank you.
It's very, very helpful to this group. And you know, we may, if it's okay, we may reach out to you again.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm always up for something. And, you know, during these times, there's not as much to do.
Yeah.
So I'm not rushing. I was late to a meeting once, and I said, you know, I'm sorry I'm late, and I have no excuse. I was just like sitting in my kitchen and lost track of time. Subway wasn't late.
Well, different. Yeah, I've experienced the same thing. It's almost like Groundhog Day, right? It's like I have to ask, what day is it today? It's just every day seems exactly the same, and so it's a challenge to keep it together.
Oh yeah, it's become a joke up here. But Governor Cuomo on Twitter will occasionally tweet out, "Today is Wednesday."
Well, Chad, thank you once again.
It's been great.
We really appreciate your insights and your sharing your experience. You're very, very inspirational to us, and thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'll see you down in Greenville one day.
All right.
Thanks, Chad. I'll bring the barbecue.
All right, I'm down for it.
Thanks, Dennis. Right. I appreciate you arranging this.
Okay, bye-bye.
Absolutely. Thank y'all.